What is exceptions? So an exception is an error which occurs while running the project workflow and it terminates the workflow without executing next step. What happens, like when exception occurs, like while running the project, when exception occurs, it terminates the workflow without executing the next step or next activity, or you can say the next sequence that we have added in our workflow in project. Exception cannot be ignored and it must be handled at any cost. If you have created any workflow, any project, and you are getting any exceptions and you are not handling that every time you will get that exceptions. So exception can be handled by using some mechanism, using some activities available in UiPath. You can handle that exceptions. So it must be handled at any cost, such as selector not found exceptions. Selector not found exception is a part of, you can say, UiPath, because it was previously, it was not in C# or any other languages. This is added for only UiPath. So selector not found exception, this is also one type of exceptions. File not found exception, like if we have created a project to open the file, or you can say to read the file, to read the config file, and the file is not available, then this exception will occur, file not found exceptions, or format exception, etc. So these are the exceptions occurs in our projects or workflow, and it terminates the workflow without executing the next activity or next sequence. So let's see a few examples of exceptions which occur in project or our workflow. First we'll learn about the selector not found exceptions. It looks like this. When we'll create any project, and if you are getting any selector not found exceptions, that will look like the same. You can see here in exception type, here in a screenshot, if you see in exception type, it shows that UiPath.core.selector not found exception. It means this is not a part of system exceptions, this is a part of UiPath code exceptions. It occurs if a specified selector not found. It means, like we are going to click on any elements and that elements is not available, then this selector not found application will occur. Let's see one example. I have created one demo for you and you will see how this error looks like. So let's suppose this is I have created already one demo for the selector not found. This is for data scraping. I have just used one Flipkart.com website, and we are going to just search Samsung S10 and we'll data scrape from there. So if I will run from here, if I will run here, then you will see the error will occur. After 30 seconds you will get an error if UiPath is not able to found the selector. So now you can see here, if you see this, the runtime execution error. So this is the exceptions. If you see here exception type, UiPath.core.selector not found exceptions. So which selector is not found? So let's see here. We have used one attached browser, and from that, using that browser we are extracting the structured data from there. And for that we will have to open the website Flipkart.com. I will have to open the same S10 product which is same in title, then it will work. Otherwise it will show an exception selector not found error like this. So this type of exception we get in UiPath. This can be also handled using try catch activity. So we'll learn later. So next exception is file not found. File not found exception is also part of system exceptions. It looks like this. if you see here exception type, it's showing that system.io.found file not found exception. It occurs when requested file is not found. It means like when we are going to read config file in our project and the config file is somehow that is deleted, then you will get that error, that system.io.file not found exceptions. Suppose like you have created one project and that time your project was working fine, like there was no exception in that project, and after 4 to 5 months or after 1 year that config file is not available there. By mistake someone has deleted or that is renamed with another name. So what will happen if you run that that project? So you will get this exception, file system file not found exception. So this can be also handled using try catch activities and this the tools available in UiPath to handle the exceptions. I have just created another workflow and I'm just going to read the config xlx file, and from the set 1 I'm going to just read the data from the config file. So if I will run this, let's see what will happen. So now you can see here in the exception type the error is system.io.file not found exception. It means the file not found exception is a part of system.io class. It means it is the subclass of system.io class. So this can be also handled if this config file is not available, then using try catch and using this exception handling mechanism you can handle that exceptions. So we'll see that later. So next exception is invalid operation exceptions. It will look like this, like system.invalid operation exceptions. The message, you can see also the message here, cannot multiply a system.string with a system.string. It occurs when performing invalid operations like multiply with string value instead of integer. Like we have created one project to multiply 2 equal to 4. It should be run like 2 multiply 2 equal to 4, but the user is passing a string value instead of integer. It means there are two input box. In first input box user is passing 2, and in second input box user is passing any other value, any string value. So that time you will get this error, system.invalid operation exceptions. So let's see the example of this. If you see here, invalid operation exceptions. So here I have created I have used 2 input dialog box, and I'm just using number 1 multiply number 2, and I'm just going to run this. Here it is asking for any number, so I'm just going to put here 5, and then second number, it means I want to just multiply with 5 multiply 3. So what will happen? So here is getting an error. It's showing that cannot multiply a system.string with a system string. It means this is invalid operation exceptions. Why? Because if you see here the variable of number 1, number 2 and Kelsey, everything is showing that generic value. It means the number it is taking as a string first time. Now we are just going to change this to integer 32 and now run this, and let's see 5 multiply 3, it's showing 15, because now the UiPath is considering that we are going to multiply with the integer with integer. That's why the message is showing 15. The next exception is overflow exceptions. It will look like this. This is the type of because the overflow exception is a subclass of system.exception base class. So here you can see, if you click on detail from that exceptions, you will see here system.overflow exceptions. It means value was either too large or too small for an integer 32. Like it occurs when input value is too large or too small. So we'll just see that example of that overflow. Let's suppose we are running this and we are passing value here, any number of 5. Now we are going to do some calculation on that, and we are passing here the like overflow means we are passing here like this, and just we'll press OK. So that will show an error. So now you can see here the message is 8888885 is not a valid value for integer 32, and exception type is system.exception. And if you click on detail, you will see here the system.overflow exceptions. It means the value was either too large or too small for integer 32. So this type of exceptions is also part of system exceptions. This can be also handled using try catch activity. Now the next is format exceptions. It will also look like this. It occurs when input value is not in correct format. Okay, so let's see this. I have created one demo for you, that format exceptions. I have taken 2 input dialog box, and I'm just going to divide number 1 divided by number 2. So let's run this and check. In the first number I'm just passing 5, and the second number I'm not going to enter any integer value. I'm just going to put here that any string value by mistake. I just passed here any string value, and I pressed OK. Now let's see, you are getting an error in input dialog box. You are getting system.exceptions error. If you see here in details, then let's see here, system.format exceptions. It means the input string was not in correct format. I have just shown you the 5 exceptions, the few exceptions as an example. So there are multiple exceptions available in system.exceptions. You can handle those exceptions also. Now we'll see what is exception handling and how to handle that exceptions. So exception handling is a mechanism to detect and handle runtime errors so that the normal flow of the application can be maintained. You notice that, and we are getting one error. It means this is we got that error. So the exception handling is that detect and handle runtime errors. It means we have found that error, and now we can handle that error, is called exception handling, so that the normal flow of the application can be maintained, right? So these are the mechanisms available in UiPath to handle the errors, or you can say that to handle the exceptions, like Rethrow, Terminate Workflow, Throw, and Try Catch. So we'll see about all these 4 exception handlings. I will tell you one by one with the example, with the theory, everything. So now we'll see here what is the advantage of exception handling. Why do we do exception handling? If we'll not do, then what will happen? So you know that if we'll not handle the exception, then what will happen? It will terminate your project. It will terminate the your workflow. It will not allow your UiPath to run the rest of the activities of your project. So that's why now we'll see what is the advantage of exception handling. First, it maintains the normal flow of the application and stops abnormal termination. It means if we'll handle that exceptions, so it will maintain the normal flow. It means when we'll run that, so it will not stop until it runs all these steps, all these activities of the project. So that's why we handle the exceptions. So this is the advantage of that exceptions. Like for example, if you see here in a workflow, we have 10 activities, and let's suppose we got an error on activity 5 due to any issues. So what will happen if you will not handle that exceptions? It will stop your workflow at here at activity 5. But if you will handle that exceptions, then we can maintain the normal flow of the application and we can stop the abnormal termination. It means even that will, if we are getting an error, but that will run till activity 10, right? The next advantage is we can display user-friendly error message to the user to describe about error instead of predefined exceptions. Like we can display the user-friendly error message to the users, because the predefined exception is that is already like come with the exception classes, exceptions that might be only understood by the programmer, not by the user. So we can do one thing using exception handling. We can modify that error messages, that exception messages, and we can we can add our own messages, own exception messages, on errors to the users, so that the user can understand which type of errors they are getting. Might be the project has been delivered to the users, and now due to the silly mistake the user is getting errors, right? Then what will happen? The user is not able to run that project completely. So for that, if we will like show them a user friendly error messages, then the end user can also handle that error. Might be like we have created a project and delivered to the user, and the by mistake user has deleted the config file, and the user is running that project and he is not able to understand due to the error message is not user friendly. Then he will have to, the user will have to call to the programmer, and then again the cost will be increased. So if we will add something like user friendly message, then user will also understand that yes, the config file is not available. Then he will go to that location and he will check for that, and he will correct that. The user can run that project again, right? The next one, we can take right action to resolve errors. So what is that right actions? Like you can, for example, you can send a mail to users for error occurred, right? You can log that errors. We can look for the missing resources. We can correct the errors. We can recover the steps if application or browser crashes. It means if you are getting an error using that exception handling, we can send a mail to the user that this project has one error on this activity or like whatever, or we can log that error into log file, or we can look for the missing resources also, like file is not available or any path is not correct, like that. Or we can correct that errors. We can recover that if application browser crashes. It means like you are running one project in one IE browser or Chrome browser, or due to like any issue your browser is crashes every time, your application is like getting closed every time. Then what can we do? We can write some steps in the catch block in like exception handling mechanism, and we can recover the same things again, right? Now we learned about the try catch activity which is available in UiPath. That is try catch activities. That is a part of error handling. if we'll use that try catch activity, that will look like this: the try catch here, the try catch, and try and catches, and finally. So the try catch is one of the best, or you can say the important activity to handle runtime errors in UiPath. If you see here, there are three blocks: the try, catches, and finally. Okay, we'll see here the try block. It means the try block in UiPath is used to place the activities or sequences that may throw exceptions. Like, you know that in this workflow you will get that error. Might be you will get an error, right? Might be you are writing a code to read the config file, and you know that like anytime it can happen. The programmer knows that's why the programmer will have to put that code in try block, so that anytime if that file is missing, then the catch block can catch that error and show to the users, right? And catches block in UiPath is used to handle the exceptions. It always comes after try block. We can use multiple catches to catch the different types of exceptions. Like the term catches means the multiple catch, right? It means the multiple exception can be catched by the try catches activity, right? So that's why the term is used catches. Okay, so we can use multiple catch to catch the different types of exceptions. Now the finally block, the last is finally block. Finally block is used to execute the important activities which is to be executed whether an exception is thrown or not. For example, if you are using any resources that should be free, right? Like cleanup activities code, something like kill all open process. So all the process should be written in finally block. It means you are getting an error or not, your finally block will be executed. It means if you write any activities, if you put any activities in that finally block, that activity or steps will be executed. So normally we'll use kill process something, right? And using that kill process, we close that, like internet browsers, whatever we have opened at the time of using project, we can close at the time of end of the project. So in the finally block we use that kill process. Okay, so this is the same as like for example, you are going to use the fridge, and from the fridge you have taken a water bottle, and you drank water, and after you cannot keep the fridge door open, right? You have to close that door of the fridge. So this is also same as that finally block. It means at last you have to close all these resources which you have used or you are using, right? If you see here in left side, it's showing like MSCORLIV. Like if you go to search that exceptions from the catches block, you will get this one. So the meaning of MSCORLIV means Microsoft Common Object Runtime Library. Okay, so this is a part of Microsoft Common Object Runtime Library, and this is also a type of .NET. So we'll learn about the exception classes. System.exception classes is the main class, or you can say the base class, which is used to handle system related exceptions, right? System.exception classes has various child classes, or you can say subclasses. So if you see here the left side, they are not only this. If you will open that, if you see here in UiPath catches block, if you just click on browse for types, so and you type here system dot, then you can see here there are lots of exceptions available in in UiPath.NET type. You can see here, like missing field exception, missing member exceptions, missing method exception, multicast not supported, the system.io directory not found exceptions. So these are the exceptions available in UiPath. So these are the subclasses, exception subclasses of system.exceptions main class. Okay. Now we'll see the system exception properties. So below are the few properties of system exceptions. This is not all, but this is just few that is important, that mostly used in every programming languages. Like message, it is used to show the exception message, stack trace and inner exceptions, data and sources. So these are the properties of system exceptions. Note, these are not all properties, just few important properties. So if you will see here, I'm just going to just show you that the property of system exceptions. So normally if you'll use here the message box, I'm just going to not in detail, just showing that the that property. So if you'll click here exceptions dot, if you'll click on dot, then if you'll see here the tool, there is icon like tool. So these are the properties, it means these are the property of exception. So if you see here, the data is also property of exceptions. Now the another tool is showing here the help link, then h result, then inner exceptions, message, source and stack trace, and after that target side. So these are the properties of exceptions. Now we can see few examples of try, catches and finally block. First examples will take like login to Amazon website and recover if browser crashes. Okay, so we'll learn about the try, catches, finally with example. I will tell you how to log into the Amazon website, and if your browser is crashes due to any reason, then how can we recover, right? So let's see. I have already created one project here. This is the normal steps. You all know that I have just put some activities here to log into the Amazon website. Run this project. So now you can see here, it clicked on that login option and then email and then password. So this is the normal without try catch. Now what I'm going to do, if due to any mistake, let's suppose I am not on that page, I am not on the home page of Amazon.com here. If you will keep your website open on this page, then your project will run. So like knowingly I am going to do one mistake. I am just going to click here, okay, and then I am just running this project. So the main motto is to show you that what is the use of that try catch block. So see here, now you are getting error that UiPath.co.selector not found exception. It means you are getting an exceptions. So our example is log into Amazon website and recover if browser crashes. So the main work is here, we have to log into the website, right? Even the browser crashes or whatever. So what we'll do, we'll put this steps, the complete activity in try catch block, in try block. So for that we'll just select this activity and we'll press Ctrl T from our keyboard, or you can just right click here and select this option, surround with try catch, right? Or you can do one thing, you can just select, take one activity try catch and you can connect with the start node. You can cut this, and then you can put that activity in try block, right? But the simple process, you can just select that activity and press Ctrl T, or you can right click on that and you can select the surround with try catch. Okay, so now what will happen, we have just put that activity in try block, so it will open that, it will try to run this project, and if this is getting an error, then that exception can be handled here in catches block. So in catches block, if you see here, if you click here, there are lots of exceptions classes available here. So you know that we are getting an error of selector not found exception, right? So what we can do, you can just go to browser for types and you can click here selector, you can write here selector not found exceptions. So if you let's see here UiPath.core.selector not found exception, so we'll select this and we'll click on OK. So now we have taken that exception handling classes here. Now we can take one message box here. Okay, so instead of taking a message box, what we'll do, we'll remove this, and in catch block here we will take one open browser, because we will have to open this browser again and we have to log into Amazon website, and here we'll write www.amazon.in. okay, and from the right side we'll select from IE to Chrome browser. Okay, in the do section we can just use one log messages. Okay, and we'll drag and drop here that log messages, because if we'll get that error, then we'll also have to log that error. Okay, or you can use the right line activity to to log that here in output sections. So we can just select here as a warning or error also, and you can put here, because we are writing this in catch block, then we'll write here recovering from browser crashes. Okay, and then we can just click here plus exception dot message. Now if you see here, if we are writing here exception dot message, so message is the property of exception classes, right? So it will just show the message of exception. Whatever exception we'll get here, we will also include, we will write here with this part. Okay, now we'll do one thing. In the do section we'll copy the same thing that we'll have to do. So we'll just copy this and we'll go to the, okay, so we'll copy this and go to the catch block. In do section we'll write paste this Amazon login again. Okay, so first time what we are going to do, we are just going to keep the same page open, and then we'll run this, and let's see it's going to catch this block or not. Okay, so let's run this. So now you can see. Okay, so here if you'll see the output, there is no error exceptions here. Now we are just going to do one thing. We will not keep open this page, we'll just click here. Okay, and now run this project and let's see what's happening. So what will happen, it will open a new browser and it will open that URL amazon.in, and then it will complete the same steps after browser crashes or after getting exceptions. Okay, so it opened one website amazon.in and now it's, and then it's done. And now if you'll see here in output section, you are getting an error like first exception handling execution started, second one the error log has been log here in output line, recovering from browser crashes, cannot find the UI element corresponding to this selector. Okay, it means we got that error, and after that we completed our same steps. It means we recovered from the browser crashes. See the second number, the example of multiple catches. Press Ctrl T to put that activity in try block here, and then we'll take multiple catches here. I will show you how to add multiple catches. So we can just click on add new catch and we can select from here, like let's suppose we are getting an error like for format exceptions. So we'll click here and we'll look for the format exceptions. System dot format exceptions. Okay, so we have taken one activity here, that is format exceptions, and now we can use one log activity here, log message, and we'll put here, and we'll take an error and we'll write here this is for format exceptions. Okay, and then we can use the plus option to add the exception messages, exception exe dot message. So we have used one catch here in catches block. Now I'm just going to add the second one. We'll click here and I'm just going to take this time the system dot exception. So system dot exception will handle rest of the all errors which will occur in this try block, right? So in this again I'm just going to put here the log message activity, and this time I will write here as a warning, as a level warning, and then here I will write this is for exception class, and then here I will write exception dot message. Okay, so this is how you can add multiple catches in UiPath, right? And then let's run this. Please enter any number. Let's suppose I am putting here 54, and please enter any second number. I'm just putting here any string value and just press OK. Now just see here in output, it's showing this is for exception class mn is not a valid value for integer 32. So now you can see here the second catches block. It means the system exception class catched the exception, this one. The next one is how to handle config file exceptions. Okay, so in handle config file exceptions, the third example I will tell you how to fix the exception, how to handle the exception of config file missing type, right? So the file not found, I have used that. So now if exception file like config file is missing, then we are getting file not found exceptions, right? So what can we do? We can first put that activity in try catch block using control T, and then in the catch block we can take a file not found exceptions, or we can take system.io exceptions, or we can directly take system.exceptions. So all three will work same, right? Now we can drag and drop one log message activity here, and as a warning, and here we'll put that config file is not available or renamed. Please check. So as I already told you that the advantage of exception handling, we can show the user friendly error message to the end users, to the user, right? So by this way you can show the user friendly messages, like we are writing here config file is not available or renamed, please check, and run project again, right? And now we can just put here exceptions so that it will show to the user, or if the programmer can understand, dot message, right? And now we can run this. Okay, now just click on output. It is showing here exception because it caught the exception, and the message is config file is not available or renamed, please check and run project again, and then the predefined exception is showing here. So by this way we can handle the exception. Fourth, we'll see here the complete example with try, catch, and the finally block. As you already learned about the try and catches block, and now I'm just going to show you the finally what we can use. As I already told you that you can write here some code that must be executed every time, even like the exception occurred or not. This could be like cleanup code, something. So we'll take here one first log here, log message here in finally block, and we'll write here information finally block CCU executed, and then we will take one kill process activity, kill process, and in the finally, as you already learned in the programming languages, that in the try catch block, if you have opened a connection like using that connection dot open, then in the finally block you should close that application like using the connection dot closed, right? So this is the same as that we can close all these processes, we can close the connections, we can close the applications, we can close the files. So let's suppose we are using the kill process to close Excel file, because we have used the Excel file. Now we are just closing the Excel file off, end of the project. Now we have used, let's suppose, one Chrome browser. Then we can also, in double quotation, we can write code to close this process here also. Let's run this, and now we'll see here it will close the Excel file and the Chrome browser also. Okay, so now if you'll see here, the Chrome browser is not there and the Excel file is also closed, because with the use of kill process. And finally, if you see here in output, first exception started, then in catches block config file is not available, this exception occurred, and then in finally block we had used this log messages, and we had written finally block executed. So this is the same message also executed here in finally, and then using kill process we have killed or like Excel application and the Chrome browser, right? Now we'll learn about the throw activities. What is the use of throw activity? So throw, it will look like this in UiPath. So throw is another activity of error handling in UiPath, which is used to throw the exceptions explicitly, or you can say manually, in UiPath. You can create your own exception message and show to the users. It can be placed under finally block and can be executed. It means the throw activity can also be placed under finally block, and it can be executed from the finally block also. You can create your own exception messages, like custom exception messages, and you can show to the users. Let's see one example of. We will take the activity of throw here, and we can just drag and drop, and we can put here in exception here in catches block also, and in finally block also we can write this. We can use this activity in throw activity. So throw activities is throws and exception. So it is also used to throw and custom exceptions. Either you can use just exception, which is thrown by the this catches block, this exception. So I have just currently used exception, and let's run this. It will throw an error. Now if you see here, the source is showing throw. It means the using throw activities we are throwing that message, right? The same like exception type system.io.file not found exception. Now this is like same as the error, the exception is caught in this catches. Now we can also create your own exception messages by just using, I'm just showing you here, you can write here new exception, open close bracket, double quotation. You can write here config file not found. Okay, config file not found, please make it available or correct it, right? Now press OK. So by this way we can create our own custom exception message, and we can show that message to user instead of predefined exception messages. Now you can see here in the exceptions here in message, now it's showing the config file not found, please make it available or correct it, right? So this is our own exception messages we can create here, and we can show to the user instead of predefined messages, right? Now the next is rethrow activities. Rethrow activities, it looks like this. It is available in UiPath under error handling. Rethrow activity is also part of error handling in UiPath, which throws the existing exception caught in catch block, and it stops the execution process of workflows. It must be placed under catch block. We cannot put that activity in finally block or any other block, right? So let's see one example of rethrow activity in try catch block. So just delete this, and we can just use this rethrow activity. So what will happen, whatever errors will be catched or exception will be catched, that will be thrown again to the user. So just run this. So now you can see here the exception type, same exceptions then caught by the catch block. It is rethrowing, like throwing this exception again, right? Now we'll learn about the terminate workflow activity. This is also a part of error handling in UiPath. It is used to show the error information and terminates the running workflow instance. Right? So let's see one example of this. We can just remove this and let's use that terminate workflow. Let's drag and drop here, and here in exception we can write exception. You can put the region also. Why are we going to terminate the workflow, the entire workflow? First it throws an error and then it terminates the complete workflow. Right, now you can see here we haven't used any rethrow or throw activities. We just use the terminate workflow. I just want to tell you that the sequence of the exceptions here in catches, which should be on top and which should be next. Like if you see here, sometime if you write here the file selector not found in one catches, the second one is IO system.io class exception, and in third we write like system.exception. So if you will write the system.exception on first here in reorder, like if you first you have taken system.exception, and now you are going to take another exceptions. Let's remove this, and if you are going to take new catches and we are taking here system.io, this is also work as same as IO means input output exception, which means file reading. The system.exception class can catch all these related system related exceptions here. Then there is no use of this IO exception class in next to that. So this exception class this catches always will be at last, or you can just use one catch as a system.exception classes, and then you can handle the exceptions. Right? We are going to learn about the global exception handler in UiPath. You will have seen this type of error in your project, like runtime execution error. It has a break, retry, ignore, and continue button. This type of exception you can handle using this global exception handler. We have the option to retry, ignore, continue, abort that. So let's start. What is the today's agenda? We'll learn what is global exception handler, how to use global exception handler in UiPath, how to use global handler workflow, how to retry, ignore, or abort the faulted activity when exception occurs. So what is global exception handler? Global exception handler is a type of workflow which is used to handle the errors encountered in project. So this is a type of workflow same as your sequence, flowchart, and state machine. So we have the 4 workflow. When error occurs, it redirects to the global handler workflow to log the error and handle the errors. The name is global exception handler. So as we know that we have the try catch, finally that activity, and we have the retry scope and all these things to handle the exception. But what is the use of global exception handler, and why the name is there, the global? So global means we can use this globally in your project. It means you will have to take only one global exception handler workflow, and it is able to catch your all exceptions. It is able to handle all the exception in the project. If any type of error encountered in your project, then directly it will redirect to the global exception handler workflow, and then this workflow will handle that errors. So global exception handler needs to define once in the project. It will execute every time an activity fails to execute. We have to take only one global exception handler workflow in the project, and every time it will execute when any activity fails. It helps you to execute a workflow or activity every time an execution error occurs. You can choose option to ignore the exception, retry, break, or continue the execution. The entry point of a process, usually main.xaml, cannot be declared as an exception handler. It will not give you option to declare this as an exception handler. If you right click on that main XML file, it will not allow you to mark this as a global handler. So apart from the main XML file, you can take any workflow as a global exception handler. When you add a global handler workflow, it adds all required activities, variable and arguments as a template. This is same as the reframework, because when you are going to create a reframework template, then it adds all the required activity, all the required sequence, everything it will have that in the template. So same here in the global handler workflow, it has the few limited and the important activities inside that template. So do not delete that variables and arguments from the global handler workflow template. There are few options can be used in UiPath Studio to handle the errors. Abort. So it stops the execution after running the current handler. So if you use this action in your global exception handler, then it will stop that execution after running the current handler. I will tell you about this, how to use this and how it works. Now if you use ignore, then it will ignore the exception and continue the execution from the next activity. Let's suppose you are getting an error on the one activity and it seems that you are not able to handle that, or UiPath is not able to handle that. So you can take this option ignore and it will skip that activity and execute from the next activity. Now retry. So it will retry executing the current activity which is faulted. So if you select this, if you take this option retry, so every time it will retry that current activity which is faulted up to the specified time. Or if you will not specify the count, the time, so it will retry. So, and the continue, it runs the global exception handler workflow. If you select the continue, every time it will run that global exception handler workflow and it will rethrow the exception. If project.json file has exception handler workflow, and like this is the line, if the project.json file has this line, it means your project has global exception handler applied. Let's suppose the name of the global exception handler is not the global handler. Let's suppose someone has taken a different name instead of global handler. So you can go to the project.json and you can see here the exception handler workflow, and here's the name. So you can see the name of that workflow. It means your project has global exception handler applied. So workflow name is changed automatically in project.json when you change the global handler workflow name. I will show you how to change that and how it updates in the project.json file. Now let's see all this practically, how to use global exception handler. So let me open the UiPath Studio. So I have already taken the project here, created one project, and now I'm going to take one simple example. I will take one notepad and I will just write there few lines there on that notepad, and then we'll see if the notepad is not available, then what will happen, and if we are not using the try catch activity, then so first I will show you in the debug mode and then I will show you after running that. So for that we are just going to take one type into activity, and then we need to indicate on the screen on the notepad. So for that let me take one notepad here and indicate on the screen, click here, and then here we are just going to type. So it will just go to write on the notepad file. If we'll run this, control F5, it will write here. So it means there is no issue. Now I am going to close this and now run this. So here it is trying to find the element that is notepad, and then once it is not found, then it will throw an error. you can see here it is showing that type into editable text cannot find the UI element. Now to overcome this issue, we can create one global handler workflow here. So we need to take, let's suppose this is the project name global exception handler, and it has the multiple workflow like sequence, multiple flowcharts, because you are working on a project, and that project has a multiple workflow files. So in any workflow file, if you are getting an error, then that will redirect to that workflow, that handler workflow file. So for that we need to create that. So we'll go to the new and click on this global handler. So just click here, and by default the name is global handler. If you want to change this, then you can change and create this. So make sure when you are going to create that global handler, so this should be inside your current project. Then create this. Now you can see here this is a template. It has the few things like the log error, log message activity, and the one assign activity. Here we have the result variable, and here it has the error action dot continue. Now we have created this global handler, and it has few things already there. And let's see in the variables. So we have the two variables, answer and retry, and the retry value is 0 first time. Now you can see the arguments. So we have the error info and the results. So error info will be used in the same workflow, and the result will be can be used outside of the workflow. It means in the other workflow. So that's why here it has used the out direction. And the argument type, you can see here it has something different, like UiPath.activities.contracts.error action. So error action means it is the action that I have already told you about, that like ignore, continue, abort, retry, like that. So these are the actions. And now here this is the error info. So the argument type is UiPath.activities.contracts.exception handler args arguments. So this is the arguments type which stores this type of information and the results here. And here in the variables also you can see answer, it has the string, and the retry is an integer number. Here this is the log message. So whenever the error will be thrown, it will redirect to the global handler, and as it will enter into this global handler workflow file, it will log this message error info.exception.toString. So it will log the complete exception, right? So what can we do? We can just remove this, and here we need to take the only message, not complete exception. So we can write here exception.message and then .toString. So it will just show the upper line, that is the message only. Now here you can see choose next behavior. It means after the logging the message, the error message, what will be the next behavior if any error occurred, any exception occurred. So we have the options continue, ignore, retry, abort. We can use anything. So let's suppose if you are getting an error, if you want to continue that error, then we can use this continue, as it has already used here, error action.continue. Now ignore, if you want to ignore after this a specific time, you can ignore that. So it will execute the next activity. And the retry, so every time it will retry that. And the abort means once it will get that error, it will abort that. It means the execution will be stopped. Now it's up to you which action you want to apply in your workflow. So now I'm not going to change anything. First let's run this. So control F5. Now let's see in the output section here, as we have the error action is continue, so the exception is rethrown. So every time it will rethrow the error. So you can see here it has rethrow the error and then we are getting the exception here. Now if you want to do some changes in the global handler, so for that go to the global handler and take one assign activity, and here we can take one the retry number, as we have the variable that is retry. So we'll take one the retry count, how many times it retried. So we'll take here the retry variable, and then we have the variable error info, then dot, and then we'll take retry count. So it will take the value retry count from the error info. Every time it will retry, and then it will store the value to this variable retry. So now we have the retry count, and then we can take one if activity to apply the condition, like if we the error count less than 3, then we can retry. So retry means every time up to that time it will go to the find that element, and once it is found, then it will succeed, and then it will go to the next step. And if the greater than 3, then we can take the action as a ignore, or yes, we can take ignore. So it will ignore that error, and then it will go to the next step. So what will happen? So it means sometime what happens, due to the one exception, the rest of the activities is aborted, is not able to execute that. So we can take the ignore one, and then we'll able to at least complete the next step which is required, right? So what we'll do here, we'll take here if retry count, if retry is less than 3, so we need to take one assign activity here, and we can write here the same formula, that is result. It means our result is we are going to retry this. So the variable is result, and we can take here the error action, the same as this, the error action dot continue. So here we have the error action dot. Now we have the 2-3 options here, that is abort, continue, here ignore, you can see this ignore, and then retry, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 option here. So here if less than 3, then I am putting here retry. So this global handler will retry that every time up to the 3 time, and then I'm going to take the same steps, this one, into here in the else part, and I'm going to remove this continue, and I'm going to take the ignore. So what will happen this time, if greater than 3, then it will ignore that activity, that faulted activity, and it will go to the next activity. So first let me try with the continue or abort. So what will happen, if the retry count not less than 3, then the execution will be stopped. Now let's run this. So before running this, I am going to tell you how to debug this. So if we'll debug, we have the same option, retry, ignore, restart. So if you'll click on retry, it will again re-execute the current activity, that faulted activity. If we'll click on ignore, so it will ignore that exception and continue execution from the next activity, and restart, it means again it will restart from the first activity. So this is the same we have in the debug mode, and same thing we can apply in the running mode. So let me run this, control F5. Okay, so we have got the exception message here, because we have taken not exception, we have taken the exception dot message. It is showing only that message line, and then we have the 3 count error counts, again it will retry up to the third time, and once the condition will be met, like greater than 3 not less than 3, then it will abort that, it will stop that execution. So this is the second time. So you can see here that we are getting error in the main XML file, and we have written the activities to handle in the global handler, right? We have not written any handler activity in the main XML file. So because of this is global handler, so anywhere in the project, if we have that XML file, that workflow file, it will handle that error. You can see the message, the workflow was aborted by the user due to an error, right? Because we have taken a option to error action.abort, right? So the last time it was 4th, and that's why it stop that execution here, right? And now let's suppose here in the main XML file we have any invoke workflow file, and we have taken another workflow, or let's suppose we have a message box. I'm just taking one message box. You can consider that we have the invoke workflow file, and we have the multiple activities here. I'm just taking only one to show you that if we are getting an error here, and if you are using in the else part the ignore, then it will ignore this exception and it will go to the next step. And here we are writing next activity executed. Let's suppose we have another also, so it will execute all these things. After ignoring this exception, it will execute all. So here we need to take the ignore action. So this time exception is ignored and the execution continues from the next activity. It will wait for the 3 times, and then after that it will ignore that exception and go to the next activity. Now let's save this, go to the main. Now let me run this, press Ctrl F5, and let's see the output here. Okay, so next activity executed. It means first exception was ignored, and now it will execute the another activity, that is thank you, right? And then done. And let's suppose it's going to try first time, and that is found the exception, and second time it found that one, then it will execute that. There is no issue. So I'm going to just change the timeout here, target, and I will put here 2 seconds here, so 2000 millisecond. And now clear this and run this. So this time I'm going to open the notepad, Control F5. So after first time error, I'm going to open this notepad. Okay, second time, and this is third time. It found that notepad and it is showing the message box also. Everything is done, right? Now I am going to show you that project.json file here. Open this in the notepad and click OK. Now you'll see here we have the runtime option, that is exception handler workflow, then the name is global handler.xml. So automatically it writes this global handler XML line in the project.json file. And let's suppose if you have removed this from the project here, go to the project, you can see here it looks like this. The global handler will look like this, something different from the another workflow. You can remove this from the here, remove handler, and now it is same as the normal workflow. And once you will save this and you will open this again, the JSON file, and you see here the workflow name has been removed from here because this project has not any global handler. Now you can see here also. Now again, if you want to mark this as a global handler, then you can right click here and set as global handler. Click here, and then now it is applied. Save this, and again if you see here, you will get that name there. And if you want to change the name, then you can change this, rename here, and you can here change the name as you can write here, error handler. Now press OK, save this, go to the JSON file, and then it will also update in the JSON file here, and the XML file name is errorhandler.xml. So I hope you like this video. If you have not subscribed, then please subscribe this and please like this video, and if you have any question, please comment on video. Thank you so much.